So following this session, you will receive a survey, and in there will be information about how to get continuing education units and CRC credits. And so as we begin today, again, use that chat. Encourage you to participate and ask questions. But I would like to welcome Alex D'Amato and Esther Anderson. I will let them provide a little more detail in their bio, but they are both with Independence First, which is located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and one of 8 independent living centers here in our state. So welcome, and I'm going to turn it over and let Alex and Esther take it from here.
All right, thank you, Laura, so much for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. It looks like we have 100 attendees, so welcome to all 100 of you guys. My name's Alex. As Laura said, I work for Independence First. I'm a independent living service coordinator, but the reason why I'm doing this is because I am an openly gay man. So at Independence First, we see all walks of life, especially in this field of independent living. We do see everybody. We see anybody from gender identity to LGBT to non-binary. So a lot of those topics we're going to cover today. A little bit backstory about me. I've been working at Independence First for going on a year as of September. I've spent a majority of my career working in the mental health field and community mental health and being an advocate for people with mental health, illness, and crisis interventions. So I'm really dedicated to that aspect of independent living, working with people with mental health issues and obstacles. That's something I really take pride in doing. And I'm really excited to be here to kind of give you guys a little into the world of LGBTQ inclusiveness. So, what you take from this could be good, might be stuff you already know, but it's just good to kind of touch on the topic to make sure that we as humans and we as service providers are providing a very inclusive place for people to be at. So now I'll turn it over to Esther to kind of give her introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esther Anderson. I go by she, her. I am a lesbian and I'm part of the LGBTQ community as well. I've worked at Independence First for about 3 years now. My background is mostly working in the disability community. I was a personal care worker for many years, and now I have become a service provider, mostly just providing independent living skills, teaching youth workshops, and also doing benefits counseling. So that is mostly my background as a whole. I also do some support in the LGBT community. So this topic is very important to me because inclusivity, when working with this type of community, some people don't exactly know how to approach certain topics or working with people that are a part of the community. So I hope you guys take a lot from this presentation and learn from it.
Thanks, Esther. Just to kind of follow up also on what Laura said, we will have the chat available throughout the presentation. So feel free to use that, ask questions, especially in this space. All questions are valid because this is it might be a learning experience for somebody. So definitely encourage people to use the chat. We'll go from there. So let's go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint, the fun part. All right. So some things that we're going to explore in this session is going to be how to identify people that are LGBTQ plus and how they are represented in the disability community. Some basic etiquette for interacting with people that identify as LGBTQ plus, and how to implement policies, services, and activities that are geared toward full inclusion. So that part, definitely just being able to advocate, in your workplace for different ways that we can be more inclusive. That's kind of what that talks about. And then how to advocate and implement full inclusion and representation for people that identify as LGBTQ plus that meet all core services of independent living centers. But it's not just for independent living centers. It can be for people that work in different service areas that maybe don't have core services, or maybe people that they do have core services, but they're not the same as independent living centers. So really, you know, this is just all around to be able to meet the mission and meet the core services and still be able to provide an inclusive place for people that identify as LGBTQ+. All right.
Some ground rules and notes. This is not a space for invalidating or assuming anyone's identity. We are both speaking from personal experience as LGBTQ plus identified service providers. There will be time for Q&A, as Alex had stated before, at the end, but feel free to use the Q&A section on the Zoom to ask any questions at all. We'll answer as we're going through, but towards the end, we'll answer most of the questions.
And I do just want to apologize. You will see things in here that are not virtual friendly, like our anonymous question jar, which is just going to be the question and answer on here. You know, we're all adjusting to this pandemic, you know, so I tried my hardest to make this more virtual friendly. So you might see some words in there that are not virtual friendly, but we'll make it work in this session. So sorry about that right now. So some really important statistics that were found from the Movement Advancement Project in July of 2019. This is about people with disabilities that also identify as LGBTQ+. So 40% of bisexual men, 36% of lesbian women, 36% of bisexual women, 26% of gay men, and 40% of transgender adults reported having a disability. Those numbers are pretty high, you know, and, you know, that really says a lot, you know, those numbers that, you know, we do serve people with disabilities, and there is this bracket of people that identify as LGBTQ+ that also have a disability, but being able to identify them and be more inclusive towards them is very important, because I mean, some of these numbers are pretty high, some close to almost half. You know, and we'll kind of get more into a little bit of statistics and stuff like that. Esther, if you want to go to the next slide. I think there's some more. Yeah, here's some more statistics real quick. The LGBTQ youth are 3 times as likely to attempt suicide. I can actually speak on that from different experiences that I've worked in, and I've worked in different places like psychiatric hospitals, community programs, different things like that. And people that do identify as LGBTQ+ are more likely to attempt suicide and feel suicidal. They have higher risk of smoking, higher rate of sexual and domestic violence and STIs. The LGBTQ+ seniors make up 6 to 8% of the 65+ in the USA. And we know right now, you know, people that are, you know, aging, there's been a lot of concerns with housing and a lot of different stuff. So there is a pretty big percent of those that are aging and disability persons that do identify in this community. And they're 2 times likely to live alone, have as likely to have a partner, and 4 times as likely to not have children to assist them in ADLs, and 50% less to have relatives available to assist them with ADLs. You know, and a big thing with this is they're more likely to be at risk for smoking, obesity, alcohol abuse, and HIV, which, you know, all of them are very serious things that people deal with. So just giving those statistics on those aging adults is, I think, important.
Okay, so important terms that everyone should know related to the LGBTQ plus community. So lesbian means a woman who dates other women. Gay means a man who dates other men. Bisexual or bi, a person who is attracted to people of the same gender and other genders. Straight heterosexual, a person who does not identify as lesbian, gay, or bi. Transgender, a person who identifies with a gender that is not the same as their gender assigned at birth. Non-binary or gender queer, someone who does not identify as a man or a woman, and then cisgender, a person who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. Some people also kind of get confused with cisgender as being heterosexual or straight, and that is not the case. Cisgender is just a person who just identifies with the gender they're at birth. It doesn't mean that they it defines their sexual attraction or their sexual identity in that terms. It's just they identify with who they were at birth.
All right, and then some etiquette, getting kind of in the etiquette and inclusion part. This is where a lot of things become important in helping to be inclusive with our consumers is, first off, never assume anyone's identity. This goes as sexual orientation, gender, anything like that. Just never assume that you're right, because you could be wrong. Always use the name and pronouns a person wishes to be referred to by. So examples of pronouns are him, her, she, her, they, them, zir and zir, or z and zir. So z and zir is a more upcoming pronoun, and basically that just means that they don't identify. It's kind of like they and them, but it's just another way of saying they and them. You know, and a big obstacle that some people run into is, you know, some people don't tell you off the bat what their pronouns as a person are, what they prefer. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on how to kind of approach that situation in an appropriate way. So you can see some of the examples. Taylor left their coat in the classroom. Addison gave me her favorite shawl. Vanessa loves your cat very much. Like I said, the Z and zero are more up and coming, but it's just like they and them. So, all right, we can go to the next slide. All right, so this is where we're gonna kind of ask for some participation in the chat. And we have a list of myths and facts that we're gonna go over. And each time I just wanna see, you know, maybe in the chat if people want to respond to the question, and then we'll kind of talk about it. So Esther, you can click to the next page. So I'll read the statement, and if you just want to even type an M or an F in the chat, that's perfect. And we'll kind of talk about each one. So lesbian, gay, and bisexual people can be identified by certain mannerisms or physical characteristics.
Everyone is putting M's.
Everyone is putting M. Yes, that is a myth. You can't, you know, the biggest thing growing up, I'll put this out there as personal experience. Just because someone talks a certain way or looks a certain way doesn't mean they identify as LGBTQ+. Because there are people that are, you know, what society would call metrosexual, which they may be a cis male, but they might have some femininity to them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are gay or bisexual. So yeah, that's definitely a myth. Homosexuality is a mental health disorder that can be cured by psychotherapy. Awesome. Yep. I definitely is a myth. You know, this one comes up in topic a lot, and it can go south or north, but most of the time it has to do with other things that we don't need to talk about on this call. Some people do deem it as a mental health disorder, but as far as the DSM and you know, the diagnosing books say it's not a disorder, and you can't really cure somebody being homosexual. Esther, do you want to take the next two?
Sure. It is okay to assume some person's gender. Yes, you guys are correct. It is definitely a myth. It is not okay to assume a person's gender. You do not know what a person might identify as. You cannot just look at a person and tell who they are. It's just like the term, don't judge a book by its cover. You cannot do that. So yes, it's definitely a myth. LGBTQ are more than twice as likely to have a mental health condition. Yep, you guys are correct. Most of you guys are saying fact. It is true. LGBTQ people community are more than twice as likely to have mental health conditions. And someone said societal norms or stresses due to social unoxygenous. Okay. Yep. That is very true. Yep.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Alex.
Oh yeah, I just saw in the chat that someone said fact or more, and definitely it could be more than twice. It could be 4 times as likely. Because society, from my standpoint as a gay man and being in the community and seeing it, society hasn't really completely accepted the fact that there are LGBTQ people and they're kind of here to stay. And that, not being able to be accepted in society, just that alone can put someone's mental health in a downward spiral and make them feel certain feelings that, someone that doesn't have that, or that does have that society acceptance wouldn't have. So it could be higher.
Yep. Definitely. And also, even when it comes to statistics, people who are a part of the LGBT community might not feel comfortable enough to identify themselves as a part of the community. So gathering that data would not always work out to that point.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take the last 2, or you want to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. Okay, never mind. You can go ahead. At the end of the myth and fact sheet, we're going to switch interpreters.
Okay.
Okay.
LGBTQ youth are 2 to 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. Yep.
Yep.
You guys are correct.
Fact.
That is a fact. It is a sad fact, as someone had stated in the chat as well. Early experiences of abuse or problems with brain chemistry cause people to be lesbian or gay. Yep, completely right. It is a myth. There's no correlation with abuse or brain chemistry or anything that causes people to be gay or lesbian. We all know that. Well, most of us all know that. We're born this way. There's nothing that causes us to be this way. So that is correct. And we'll let the interpreters switch.
I think there's a couple more myth and facts, maybe.
We'll let them switch until we go to the next one.
Okay, perfect.
And we should be good.
Okay.
Perfect. Esther, I'll take the rest of these.
Go right ahead.
HIV/AIDS is a gay disease. Yep, this one is definitely a myth. Most definitely. It in the 80s, when the early 80s, late 80s, somewhat into the 90s, the media definitely portrayed it as a gay disease. But nowadays it's not just gay people that get HIV. Even back then, it wasn't just gay people that got HIV. They were just kind of the poster for it. So it's not a gay disease. LGBTQ plus humans don't make good parents, and a child should have a male and female parent. All right. Yep. Definitely a myth. We put this in here because right now there's a big debate about LGBTQ plus parents having children, adoption, and stuff like that. Just because you're gay doesn't make you a bad parent. There's actually lots and lots of people that have children and eventually come to terms with their sexuality and end up being more open about their sexuality. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I see someone said their niece and her partner have been together for 22 years and have 4 glorious children. Yeah, just because, like I said, just because someone's LGBTQ plus doesn't mean they're not going to make a good parent. It's just something that's being debated that shouldn't be right now. But what can you do? You got to fight the debate, huh? LGBTQ plus youth who reported higher levels of family rejection during adolescence are 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs. Yep, it's true. It's true. People that I mean, even we could even change this to be, LGBTQ youth who report higher levels of family rejection during adolescence can be 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs, attempt suicide, engage in dangerous activities. Especially in that adolescence age, any sort of rejection, even family rejection, does really affect that fight or flight mode and that risk assessment that's still being built. So we still, there's many things we can add to this, but it is a fact. Nearly a fifth of students are physically assaulted because of their sexual orientation, and over a 10th because of their gender expression. It is a fact. Yep. It's a sad fact for sure. I can't say from my privilege of my high school, we had a gay straight alliance club. My school tried to be as inclusive as possible, as possible. There might have been 1 or 2 people who verbally assaulted me, but I ignored it. But unfortunately, there is a huge population of people that identify as LGBTQ plus that are assaulted over their sexual orientation and gender expression. The statistics aren't really there for that, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. But I've read a couple articles in recent years and up to this year where it actually says that that's declining. So hopefully that continues to decline, and youth and students can live their life without rejection, assault, or anything of that sort, or verbal abuse. All right, Esther, ready to go to the next one? All right, something to keep in mind. So this picture can be confusing to some, and also be a little hard to understand. But on the left, we kind of have a color spectrum. Okay, and on the right, we have this full circle color wheel, including grid marks for each individual color. So what we like to say is, instead of LGBTQ plus community being like this spectrum from here to here, it's just kind of a wheel, and there's somebody that can fill in any part of that circle. So when you look at the LGBTQ community, it's more of this circle of color, not necessarily this left to right spectrum, because there's people in there that identify totally different than what would fit even on a spectrum. So the LGBT community is like this color wheel. Esther, do you have anything to kind of add to that?
Well, kind of like with the whole spectrum, like of everyone is kind of on the wheel and things like that. It kind of represents that when it comes to gender fluid and everything like that, people can become different parts, different not categories, but you can identify in so many different aspects. You can be a female, but also identify in masculinity, but you can be attracted to a different type of gender and then have different type of gender expression. So when it comes to the different colors, you just aren't on one side of the spectrum. You are fluid in the movement of colors is how I see the wheel.
You did a much better way of explaining that than I did. Thank you, Esther. Thank you. So the role of a service provider, provide fair and equal access to resources. I mean, this is something we should be doing anyways, regardless of somebody's gender identity or sexual orientation. Listening and support, when we do this, we talk about peer specialists in the room, and we kind of get their perspective on being able to provide services, and then advocating for your consumer and promoting self-advocacy. This is something that all of us as service providers, regardless of, what kind of place we are providing services, this should be something we always provide somebody. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of discrepancies with people that identify as LGBTQ plus. But this is definitely where, the importance of being able to help your consumer and provide and advocate and help them self-advocate is going to be important, especially for people that are LGBTQ plus.
The next one is, did you go through all of them?
I went through down to promote self-advocacy. Yep.
All right. So your role is not and does not give you permission to an opportunity to speak for your consumer. So when you are working with a consumer and you guys perhaps are going to go speak to someone, do not speak for them. Let them share their story. Let them advocate for themselves. You can be there to support them, but don't speak for them. Never out your consumer without their consent. That is something that most people should know, but outing your consumer is definitely not is probably the worst thing anyone could do. Use your consumer as an educational tool without consent. Example, asking questions about their identity that are unrelated to the services being provided. So when you are asking them certain questions and providing the service, ask yourself, is this question relevant to what I'm providing? Is it going to have any projection or data collection to my company? Don't just ask a question because you want to know or that you think you should know. Just make sure it actually has a validation to the actual service you are providing. Something to think about: how will you hold yourself and your colleagues accountable to best practices while working with your clients that are a part of the LGBT community? Would you like to add anything else, Alex?
No, you did a great job. And the thing with how to hold yourself and your colleagues accountable is, just I always think of it as you're there to provide a service. And just everyone that you're providing the service to is getting fair treatment, which should be it in any way. But I think also the big part of this slide is, not using a consumer as an educational tool. That's huge without consent. But then also outing your consumer without their consent. Sometimes that can be a little bit confusing. If you're ever on a call with your consumer and you out them, that would just be that's just not okay. I even say this, I've referred consumers to the LGBTQ plus community center, but I don't even out them to them. I won't say hey, so-and-so is a possible gay man looking for services, because now I'm taking that outing the consumer and without their consent, and I'm providing it to somebody else. And some people don't want to be outed. Some people just want to, I hate the word stay in the closet, but I'm going to use it. That some people just want to be in the closet and they don't want to be out. So outing a consumer can be sometimes very traumatic.
And with that, also be cautious of where you're having these types of conversations or phone calls. Don't have it around, people that can hear it or those type of things, because if you are having those types of conversations and someone might overhear you speaking about it, other people might hear it and they might be inclined to maybe know who you are speaking about. So just be cautious about that as well. But that is also another thing about holding yourself and your colleagues accountable. So just make sure that you hold other people accountable. If you are noticing that people are trying to listen in, call them out. So that's just something else to think about.
All right, the intake process and record keeping. The question of gender with simple female and male options can pose challenge for trans and gender non-conforming people, particularly those that are in the process of or even just considering transitioning. When we talk about the intake forms, we talk about more of like the forms that aren't like the Fed forms or the government forms, because obviously we can't change that. Something that's trying to be changed, but a lot of places have changed to male, female, unknown, or other, which I guess is all right. But this is just more stating like if you have a basic intake form that isn't going to be used for like federal reporting or government reporting, taking a look at that and maybe seeing if there's a way that you can change it to be more inclusive, because it can pose a challenge for trans and gender non-conforming people. And, that other does help. I think unknown, I feel like when I see unknown on intake form or like a form in general, I feel like it's kind of just like a slap in the face for people who don't know, who are in the unknown, but they have a feeling of what they want to be. So I think other is a best practice. And like I said, these are just for forms that are non-reporting forms, non-federal, non-governmental forms. Some consumers may be concerned about how the data may be used or compared to personal records, or they may feel limited by the options. So, again, I've seen some forms where people can write in their own salutation, people can write in their own gender. But once again, of course, in this field, there are the governmental and federal mandate forms that have specific genders listed, and specific salutations listed. So this is just more for like in-house stuff.
And Alex, we've got a question in the Q&A that kind of applies to that slide, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Speaking. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, how do you use pronouns then when trying not to out a person, but trying to respect choice? In other words, if they prefer a pronoun use and you're referring to him, to her, him, /z, because they are using pronouns but may not have formally come out.
Yeah, totally. So, a good way, I think best practice for pronouns, first off, we're humans. I think that's one thing to recognize, is that we're humans. And, if you call somebody that has the name Tom, which is usually used for a masculine boy name, and you call them and they sound more feminine or they don't sound more masculine, especially when you're going over paperwork, you can always ask, hey, like, what are your pronouns? Or, how do you want me to appropriately identify you? Asking those questions, being able to just be open with them about like accepting that you're even willing to know what their pronouns are is going to be very important. It only becomes a problem is when people assume. So, so when you're trying to not out a person, but trying to respect choice, I mean, honestly, it's just easier to ask about the pronouns than to just assume.
Thank you.
So that's good. Yep. All right. So Esther, do you want to take this next slide?
Sure. So examples that you can have on like the intake process forms or record keeping for genders, male, female, other, salutations, Mr., Miss, mix, other, please specify. The please specify is probably the best one that you guys can put on there because it allows them to identify what they would like to have, what they are. Name, preferred name if applicable. That is also very important as well. Especially like when you guys might have, especially like in the healthcare field, people who identify as transgender, they have a lot of issues when it comes to medical records and their name. And sometimes when it doesn't match up, it doesn't always equal out sometimes. So when that happens, you might be like, well, this, instead of just being like, well, what's your real name? Never ask that question. Just ask like, is there another name that you might go by, or is there another name that you might be under? Do it that way instead of saying, what is your real name? Because that is, they might take offense to that because that is not their real name. That is not the name that they go by because of all the things that have been going on in the transgender community as well. If the data is not essential, consider removing the question. Make sure the question is clearly optional or allow people to self-identify by asking an open-ended question. Like I kind of stated before, if there's no reason for that question to be on there and there's no purpose for the data collection or gathering or purposes of reporting, don't have it on the report. Ask yourself, what is the rationale for asking about gender on this particular form? If you have a form that is just asking questions about like, how's your day been going? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating healthy? If you have something on there about your gender, ask why that is on there. Unless it's for statistics, then possibly you might need it on there. But if you don't really use that for any of the data collecting, then take it off of the form. How does asking for the data relate to your organization's overall diversity strategy? Ask and see, does the data actually help with understanding how much your organization works with different populations? Does it configure to your reporting? Does it actually help you guys change how you guys are working in the different populations in your community? Just ask those different kinds of questions when you are doing those different forms. And how will the data be used, protected, and reported? A big thing with individuals is they are cautious about giving out information because they don't know how it's going to be protected and they don't know where it's going to be reported to. So make sure that when you are asking these questions or gathering data, that you do let them know specifically where the information is going, how it's going to be protected, that it's only going to be confidential, it's not going anywhere, and it's going to either be gathered just for you and it's not going to be sent out for public eyes or anything like that.
And we're going to switch interpreters.
Okay.
Perfect. And then we also have a question, which I think we can answer in the Q&A.
And you're good.
All right, so there's a question in the Q&A that asks, is it okay to ask what their legal name is? So this is a weighted question. If you're filling out federal documentation where like you need to provide like information that their legal name has to be provided on, then it is okay to ask. But if you don't need their legal name, then you don't need to ask for it. It gets kind of, like I said, weighted depending on, you know, if the legal name is needed, like if you're filling out something that needs to be submitted to like insurance or that needs to be submitted to a federal agency, you know, then we might have to ask for that legal name. But, you know, even when asking, say, you know, I need your legal name. However, that's not how that's not how I'm going to identify you as. But just being able to have that legal name for this document because I need it is going to be respectful, and just reassuring them that this is the only time you're gonna need it.
Yeah, just make sure that they know the reason why you need it, but also don't go so much into the legal name aspect. Just try to say what other name you might go by. Saying the term legal kind of people might take offense to that because so many people are trying to fight to get their names changed, so it could be legal. So I would try to do it more as in, is there another name that you might go by because I need to submit a document for your insurance and this is the reason why, and just do it in that context versus I need your legal name so try to do it that way.
Or even asking like, if like you just went up to somebody who's like, hey, what's your legal name? That might come off like, why do you need that? So just being able to explain the parameters as to why you need that legal name is going to be helpful. And then just, like I said, ensuring them that that's not the name you're going to use for them. And also just understanding that, people that do name changes and people that do transition, sometimes, I've worked with somebody who was transitioning and a week later they came to me and they said, this is my new name. This is my new identity. So be aware of that you may be working with, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, it's not anything realistic, but you may be working with somebody named Tom, and next time you meet, Tom may have a different name. So being able to understand that it could change that quick, and just being able to understand that that's how that person feels best that they want to be identified as. So moving on to the peer support and group activities, be inclusive of LGBT people in instructions, examples, and activities. Instead of writing he, she, or him or her, use the gender neutral pronoun they to include all genders. Instead of husband and wife, use spouse and partner to include all couples. Are you in a relationship versus do you have a boyfriend is very important. Just because I identify as a gay man doesn't mean I have a boyfriend. So asking, are you in a relationship is much more appropriate than do you have a boyfriend? And the husband and wife instead of spouse, or spouse and partner instead of husband and wife is also very important because sometimes you meet people and you don't know their story. So just being able to leave that door open for them to, say I have a spouse or partner is more inclusive than husband versus wife.
Can I interject on that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, because many times when I go out, I have my wedding ring on, and all the time when I'm out doing workshops or I'm meeting people, they say to me all the time, oh, so you have a husband? And all the time I get put into an awkward situation because then I have to out myself to people stating, no, I have a wife. So try to be as inclusive as possible by stating spouse or partner, because I don't feel like I have to out myself to people all the time, but I'm not going to have someone ask me questions about a husband that is completely imaginary, because I'm not married to a guy. I'm married to a woman. So just try to inclusive and state those type of things instead of saying straight husband or wife.
This is
sorry,
Laura.
Alex.
No, and this is Laura. Sorry for interrupting, but I started to type it and it wasn't coming across correct. I've heard feedback, from friends and family that sometimes they're not people. They may, they make the assumption about who and what lifestyle they have, and they may not even ask. Like, they'll come up and ask me about my husband, but they won't ask maybe my stepson about his fiance or his partner, because they know that he is gay. So I've heard that comment from others that everybody asks about, everyone's, life and who they're friends with or living with. And then when it comes to someone who is LBGTQ, everyone's afraid to ask.
Definitely. I definitely know exactly what you're talking about. Or instead of like, for a while, there was part of my family that when I would go, and I would go with somebody I was in a relationship with, they would always state that it was my friend, because they didn't know how to properly ask or properly identify them, which over the time they have learned, and they have listened to me, and they've, I've kind of given them like the family rundown of this presentation, like, hey, you could say, are you guys in a relationship? Is that your boyfriend? Especially because it is another cis male with me. So in that instance, like, you could ask, I would feel comfortable somebody asking that. But yeah, it can be an uncomfortable conversation for people to ask about relationships for people that identify as LGBTQ plus. But when people start talking, usually conversation leads to how people want to be addressed. So I definitely understand what you're saying with that.
And I think that many people just feel kind of a little uncomfortable asking about people's life that are in the LGBTQ plus community because they aren't familiar with it. So they don't know how to go about having those conversations. But the one thing they have to understand is that the LGBT community, our lives are just the same as everyone else's. So it's not that they can't relate or they can't find similarities in each other's lives. The only difference is that who we love. So I think people kind of don't know how to go about it because they feel like there's going to be such a big difference in the topic of conversation, but there really isn't going to be. So people need to kind of take that step away and try to talk a little bit more and ask more questions, because then they'll actually realize, like, oh, you're having this issue with your girlfriend or your wife or your boyfriend or your husband, and it's the same exact problem as I'm dealing with my wife or husband. So it's the same exact thing. So yeah.
Great answers. Thank you.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a Q&A, and it says, and what about pansexual families? They might not identify one primary partner, and that's true. There's people that are in polyamorous relationships where they're pansexual families, polyamorous or pansexual. You can use both terms, where they might have more than one partner. In that instance, it's still up to the person to identify their partners. Even if you knew that they were in a pansexual relationship or a polygamy relationship, that doesn't mean that they might be open to it. And even if they are open to it, they might be able to better explain that. I really can't explain that from my perspective because, I've met people in those situations and I've talked to them, and they usually do identify their partners. But I think someone speaking from that would be much better than me. But just giving them the option to identify their partner, or if they don't want to identify their partner, or they might say, I have multiple partners, and just leave it at that. So that's definitely a good question. And I probably will put that more into my slide because I think that's an interesting topic. So thank you for whoever sent that. So moving on, Esther, is this your slide or mine?
Yours.
Oh, all right.
That's the last bullet point.
All right, thank you. Getting off topic here, but it's okay. It's good to get off topic to talk about a topic. Intersectional peer support opportunities, workshops, communities provide diverse and range of perspective and inclusive across all identities. So being able to, if you're in an ILC, being able to have peer support groups for people who identify as LGBTQ plus, or workshops. I know Independence First, I think I can gladly say this and say this with positivity, that we are actually moving to a more universal workshops where, they aren't gender orientated. And even with our curriculum, we are going through our curriculum and changing some of the wording to be more inclusive to gender identification and the LGBTQ plus community. So being able to, and also be able to have communities that promote diversity. There could always be an LGBTQ alliance. There's lots of community programs. I know here in Milwaukee, we have lots of community programs that do some work with Independence First that do kind of structure their mission around supporting LGBTQ plus people and people with disabilities. So, you know, just getting different perspectives and, you know, opening up services to kind of not necessarily cater, but to let LGBTQ people know, especially those with disabilities, that there are support groups for them, and the workshops being more inclusive. All right, Esther, you can go to the next one.
All right. So accommodation. So for many gender nonconforming and transgender folks, using gendered restrooms can be uncomfortable and in some cases dangerous. Providing a gender neutral bathroom can help alleviate anxiety and keep transgender and gender nonconforming folks safe. In Independence First specific, we have gender neutral bathrooms in there, and they are labeled. So we have that one safe space where people can go to if they feel more comfortable there. Visibility within an organization can also help make LGBTQ plus folks feel safe and respected. A simple way to do that is just having a sticker that says LGBTQ plus ally on a desk or on a computer. That can just let people know that they can be their whole self and honest with you while they are there in your organization. Even just having posters up about different support groups or anything that pertains to the LGBTQ plus community inside of the organization will allow people in that community to feel a whole lot more safe and feel like they can open up and be themselves within your organization. So, breakout session, even though this isn't really a breakout session.
Which isn't, yes, we're back to the virtual part of things, and we'll probably utilize the chat for this. You know, for this, we had people use sticky notes to write down 3 to 5 things that your place of work is doing right with intake processes and providing additional supports for people that identify as LGBTQ+. So if you guys want, you guys could just go ahead and comment in the comments for this. And then you can write 3 to 5 things your place of work could be doing to improve access supports for LGBTQ+ identified consumers. So if you guys want to put in the chat just ways that you guys are doing things right or ways that you can improve, you can go ahead and do that. And just let anyone know that this is a safe place to kind of not talk about your work, but talk about ways to change and ways to improve and ways things are going right. Because, you know, we might see something that we might want to do. So, you know, if you guys want to go ahead and post some of those things in the chat, if you feel comfortable, we'll kind of give it a minute or two. And if not, we'll move on from here. All right, Angie, that is a very good point. Visibility ally stickers. That is something that we're also looking to, and as well as putting up stickers for allies. Okay, yep, change forms. Gender neutral bathrooms, okay. Martha, all right. And visibility, I think the visibility ally stickers are definitely something that I want to definitely see be implemented. Because it does provide such a welcoming, safe place knowing that you're around people that are allies of your sexuality and allies of you. Because like I said earlier, you know, society isn't the most accepting for people that are LGBTQ plus. And, you know, we know from the history of ADA and the history of disability rights that society wasn't really accepting of people with disabilities. And it's a continuing fight. So, you know, definitely the gender neutral bathrooms are helpful. You know, and, you know, we'll kind of get into the next slide and talk about gender neutral bathrooms. Adding life partner under marital status is important.
Someone had diversity notices. Oh. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
So are diversity notices something that would be sent out to people before they come in, or is it just to everyone that you work with, or is it to the employees? That's from P. Jacob. That's something that interests me a lot, diversity notices.
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool. All right. Recruiting LGBTQ plus peer specialists, that's important.
Posted,
You know,
diversity is part of our strength. Okay.
all right.
I like that.
Good.
Having it up in the
Good.
organization. Questionnaire and intake.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. So Esther, do you want to click to the next slide?
Yes.
Thank you guys for participating in our breakout session virtually.
And it seems like you guys are doing a lot already in your organizations to be inclusive.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, all right. So we're going to talk about a game of scenarios. So when we did this in person, we kind of had people answer it. But we're actually just going to talk through these to the best ability of how to respond to some of these scenarios that people have. So we're going to talk about first intake. So during an intake, you meet your consumer whose name is Tim. While speaking with Tim, you start going through the intake. Upon the selection that of gender, Tim appearance is different than the gender norm of a cis male. So Tim doesn't look like a male. How do you go about asking the consumer for their gender? So a big way, you know, we've been talking about this kind of the whole time, is just being able to say, like, how can I best and appropriately and to make you feel comfortable identify you? How would you like to be identified as? You know, or you could always just say, you know, what do you identify your gender, or what gender do you identify as? Perfect. Good job, administration, IL resources. Denise too, what do you want me to put down as your gender? Or you can decline to answer. That is also a very important topic, Denise, and thank you for bringing that up, is they have the right to deny, to tell you their gender. So, you know, you can also ask them what their pronouns are. Like, what, you know, more and more in corporate America and in bigger corporations, you're starting to see people's emails come out with their pronouns attached in their signature. So I think as we progress as a society and as we progress as becoming a more inclusive society, I think we will see that more. And I think that we'll start, instead of asking people what's their gender, I think we're going to ask them what their pronouns are. So you can even start off and say, like, hey, my name's Alex. My pronouns are he and him. Nice to meet you, Tim. What are your pronouns? You know, something as simple as that. Okay? Or even that one, when it comes to gender, how would you like to answer that?
And we're going to switch interpreters, Alex.
Okay, perfect.
And you should be good to go.
All right. Esther, do you want me to continue?
Sure.
All right. So you have a new consumer who has expressed their change in gender identity. So you've been working with a consumer and they've already expressed their change in gender identity, whether it's happening, whether they've talked about it. The consumer asks about using the restrooms in the building. How do you respond? So there's two ways you can respond. If you're a service provider that does have a gender neutral bathroom, you can let them know, hey, we have both male and female and gender neutral bathrooms. You know, and a big thing is we talked about before, like, you know, we talked about this before, that sometimes it can be a little threatening for somebody that is identifying their gender differently than what they were born as. So being able to let them know, like, this is a safe place. we have male, female, and gender neutral bathrooms. So feel free to use whichever one you want. For those who don't have gender neutral bathrooms, being able to just let them know that they're in a safe place to use the bathroom is going to be very important, because ILCs, I think ILCs in my eyes and service providing places are safe places and should always be safe places. So allowing them to know, like, there's the male and female bathroom, use whichever one you feel is appropriate for yourself. We can't really tell people what bathroom to use when it comes to it.
And Kathleen, you had a really good point when it comes to bathrooms, because not all the bathrooms are always in the same area. At Independence First, we have all the bathrooms in the same area, so you can just direct them to the bathroom and they can just make a choice of which one they want to go to. But make sure to state where all of them are. Say the men's are over here, the women's is over here, and the gender neutral's over there. They're in all different places in the building as well. So they have the option of knowing where to go, and you just don't out them of which bathroom that they want to go to. So that's a really good, valid point, Kathleen.
Yeah. All right. Did we get the interpreter figured out? Are we good to go with that?
Yeah, they were switched right before this question, but thanks for checking.
Okay, I just saw some stuff in the chat.
I was just answering that privately because the interpreter is visible. I think it's just a user.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
But thanks for verifying.
No problem. So they and them, this is going to be our next scenario. So you've received an order form from DVR for workshop for a consumer. The consumer name is very gender neutral. When contacting the people involved or consumer, how do you go about recognizing their gender appropriately without misgendering them? This is kind of like the intake, but a little bit different because you don't see them at all and you don't hear them. So what would be the best way to correctly and appropriately identify their gender without misgendering them? So this kind of goes back to a lot what people said on the intake part, and that is, asking how they want to be identified or asking them what they identify as is going to be very important. Kathleen, good point. Why ask on the phone? Because why does it matter? That is true. But I will say that right now, because everything is so virtual, especially with ILCs, some people don't have access to Zoom technology. They may only have access to phones. So if I'm going through like an intake on the phone, I always think best practice is when I even get to that gender part or even that salutation part, I always ask, what's the best way, or what's the most comfortable way that you feel to be identified as pertaining to gender or anything like that. And people are really good with that. And maybe introduce your pronouns first. I've been trying to do that as much as possible, but it's something that I just got to keep reminding myself to do. So it's definitely a learning curve for me, even being an openly gay man. But I also, I have friends that have transitioned. I have a friend that I've been friends with for 15 years, and she just transitioned a year ago. So I'm still getting used to the pronouns and identifying them and starting with them. But I do think that is a very good place to start. So thank you, Kathleen. All right. All right. So now this is the part where we will open it up for any questions that people attending have for us as far as inclusion, as far as LGBTQ plus questions, anything of that sort. So if you guys want to use the question and answer, if you guys want to use the chat, would be glad to answer any questions you guys may have.
Alex, this is Laura. We did have one earlier that was sort of answered within the Q&A.
Oh yeah, that one is
but
that.
There was one about the DSMR and the diagnostic manual for psychiatric care. And so
Okay.
someone was asking about, and I didn't know if you knew any of the history on that or any of that.
I do know. Yeah, I'm seeing that now. I do know that in 1987 it was removed. Because I did see you comment on that. I honestly will be completely honest. I don't know the best history on when that kind of was taken down, but I do know like with like a lot of like the Stonewall riots and stuff like that definitely changed a lot of lawmakers' minds about how homosexuality is identified in society. You know, Stonewall just last month we celebrated, I think, well, how many years was that? Sorry, I'm not the best with statistics. The Stonewall riots were, all right, 69. 51 years ago. So 51 years ago, the Stonewall riots in New York City kind of started that, the advocacy and the kind of groundbreaking that we have today for people to be openly gay and to not be treated as if it was a disorder. So that started in 1969, kind of the revolution of gays being discriminated against, and people that identify as LGBTQ plus.
So I read my Google search a little bit more in depth. So the American Psychiatric Association did, as other folks have commented, did vote to remove it in 1973.
Okay.
But apparently what was happening is they replaced homosexuality with sexual orientation disturbance. So it wasn't until 87 where it completely fell out of the DSM. And then the World Health Organization, looks like it was 1992.
Okay, so not that long ago.
In the ICD, which is the coding that medical transcriptionists use.
Okay. Yeah, so not that long ago. You know, like ADA and disability rights, there's still a lot of work to be done, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus people and laws and stuff like that. And it's, you know, I compare it to ADA and disability rights. You know, there's definitely a lot of work still to happen. I do see that question from Martha. Is there any benefit to keeping those male and female boxes on forms? Does it still go to funding or some other reason? And it's funny that you said I've had a few youth laugh when I go through the demographics. We've also had that too in some of our high school classes that we teach at Independence First, where they kind of laugh and they're like, no one really talks about gender anymore and gender fluid and being fluid. You know, but it does suck. There is benefits. I'm sure when it comes to like 703B reporting and all the federal grants and government grants that maybe ILCs get, or even other service providers, that they might need that male or female boxes checked. So unfortunately, that's still something that may be required on federal and government reporting forms for funding or for however your services you provide gets funded. All right. Someone put openly gay celebrities have helped to change attitudes over the past few decades. Oh, most definitely. Elton John, one of the biggest advocates and a gay man himself, definitely advocates for LGBTQ plus rights. Some even non-openly gay celebrities like, you know, this is cliche, but Madonna, you know, went on live TV back in 85, 84, and basically said there's a huge problem with homophobia in the United States. So yeah, definitely there's definitely been supports from celebrities, both LGBTQ plus celebrities and celebrities that don't identify as LGBTQ plus.
And I think it also has a lot to do with youth nowadays. Youth are more accepting. Youth doesn't see divide. They are changing the way that people see things and are a whole lot more accepting. So with the youth keep going the right track, I think the world will change into a whole lot better place.
Most definitely. It looks like there's another question in the Q&A. Why is the salutation necessary on intake forms? You know, the person that asks that question, I ask that question to myself all the time. Just like for me, I am a strong advocate, and I strongly believe that race doesn't belong on any forms either. Because that just, I always feel like when you put like gender, race, and like salutations on forms, like even intake forms, job forms, job applications, housing applications, any of that stuff, it's almost like you've already given somebody the okay to know what you're already giving somebody the okay to discriminate.
Yep.
By putting that stuff on the box. And bravo, ban the box. I agree, ban all the boxes that discriminate or dismantle somebody as a person.
I think that a lot of people just have kept with the salutation because that's how they have done mailings forever and ever, always Mr., Mrs., that kind of stuff. So I think that's where salutations and that whole box has stemmed from, and they just have never gotten rid of it because they want to be so formal in many aspects, and they don't think that it would be formal just to say someone's first and last name.
Right. So yeah, definitely. I don't understand why it's on there. I wish I could provide more information, but I think it's just, I feel like salutation, if it was worded the right way, could be appropriate. Like that could almost be turned into like what your pronouns are. Like, but you know, I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that one. And you know, someone put on here, gender has no influence on the services we provide, which is great. You know, I definitely agree with that. And, you know, I think just the whole idea of this training is just to kind of show people that, you know, there are ways to approach people that identify as LGBTQ plus, because I mean, I think Laura, you might've brought it up about relationships. Like sometimes people that may be in like hetero relationships don't know how to approach the situation of, you know, LGBTQ etiquette, and like, how do I identify this person? You know, fun fact about me, my partner owns a drag venue in Milwaukee. And my mother calls me all the time when she sees a picture of me or a picture of my partner with a drag queen, and she wants to comment on it, but she doesn't know how to properly identify their pronouns. So my mom will call me and be like, how do I do this? So we definitely see, like, from like a hetero standpoint, you know, a straight person or person that identifies as heterosexual, how to properly identify the LGBTQ community. So it's very important. You know, that's why I really like doing this, because, you know, it does give people a perspective and some sort of comfort to be able to identify LGBTQ plus without feeling like that they're overstepping their boundaries or that they're inappropriately identifying. So that's why I like doing this, because it does provide people with some sort of education on that. Also, Charlotte liked to put them in her web. Does it mean we still need them? Good point. Yeah, so I mean, these are all definitely great responses to like the boxes on intakes. Unfortunately, you know, there are federal and governmental forms that do allocate funding that need to be properly filled out. So of course, in that instance, we have to fill them out. So Esther, can you just click next on the slideshow real quick, just to make sure there's nothing else? All right, perfect. There's nothing else. Look at that. Our emails are attached here. And in the slideshow. I believe Laura will also be sending out the slideshow presentation. If you guys ever feel the need to reach out to us to kind of discuss something maybe you didn't feel comfortable commenting on, and you want to discuss privately, you know, we're always open for conversations and being able to talk about it. You know, so always just shoot us an email if you have a question. If you feel like you are dealing with a situation that you would want, you know, you're dealing with an LGBTQ plus consumer and you feel that, you know, you may not be able to respond the best and you just want some advice, feel free to email us about that. Let me just see here. Esther, did you have the survey and stuff you want to post?
Yep. So in the chat, I have posted a link to the survey for the presentation. It is a very general survey, so the topic is about the topic that we spoke about today.
And Esther, this is Laura.
Yes.
Because we have to do a survey on our end as well. So what I will do, if it's okay with you, is I will incorporate any questions that are in yours that I may not have in mine.
Okay.
So that I can send one survey out.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
That way you guys don't have to worry about that. You'll get one survey because that's how we collect the information for our for the federal reporting. And then I will share all of that with you as well.
Okay.
And it's how we get their email addresses for continuing education and what have you.
Okay, perfect.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. You know, definitely thank you guys for taking the time out to learn a little bit more about the LGBTQ plus community and, you know, best practices with consumers. Like I said, I'm always available. Feel free to reach me by email. I'd be glad to talk. And I appreciate your guys' time with us today and your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great rest of your day and stay safe, okay?
Alex and Esther, I can't thank you enough for your very knowledgeable and welcoming presentation today. I think everyone felt very comfortable with your presentation style and you know, addressing a topic which can be sticky for some service providers as well as our consumers. So very, very appreciative of you taking the time today to share this information statewide. And I know that our venue was not what you had originally intended, what none of us intended. So just a reminder, as I said earlier, we will be sending out a survey. I'll incorporate whatever Esther and Alex needs for Independence First. And that way you only have to do one. And then on there will be your opportunity to indicate whether you need continuing ed or CRC credits. But aside from that, it looks like we're wrapping a little bit early, so you get 10 more minutes back in your day. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.